Welcome to Lesson 3.1, all about the American court system. In today's lesson, you'll need to know about the types of law, the types of jurisdiction, requirements for a case, the dual court system, and generally be able to describe the structure and functioning of the American court system. Here's your overview, and remember to take good notes. So as far as the basics of law in America, there are multiple different ways of categorizing law. For example, there is statutory law, which means the law that is written by the legislature, and then there's common law, which is the established law created by a series of legal decisions. So for example, if a legal decision is set down, it will create what's called a precedent, and then later courts will follow that precedent as a way of ensuring fair treatment. There's two different types of law as well, called civil and criminal law. In civil law, you would have two different parties, usually private citizens or private individuals of some kind, suing each other. Criminal law, on the other hand, involves the state as one of the two parties. The state would be prosecuting someone for breaking the law. There are also types of what's known as jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is simply the authority to carry out the law and to carry out proceedings over a particular case. So, for example, a trial court would have usually original jurisdiction or the first attempt at hearing a case. But other courts, courts of appeals, have what's known as appellate jurisdiction, in which they can hear appeals. In order to have a case, there has to be requirements. So, for example, you have to prove that you have standing. In other words, you have been harmed by a particular issue related to them. So you can't say, for example, sue unless you've actually been harmed. There has to be a case, and that means that basically you can't just ask a court for an opinion about a potential situation. There has to be something that has occurred. And usually there has to be some kind of a state action involved, especially if someone is suing the state or suing the national government in order to stop something. They have to show that the state actually did something. Now, in the United States, we have what's known as a dual court system. Just as we have federalism with state powers and national powers, and some are shared, we have a federal court system with a national system and a state-level system. So there are kind of two systems happening at the same time. So there's a little fact for you that Judge Judy, we've talked about this in class, she's not a real court, but the cases are real, and they're usually lifted from small claims court. So we'll talk about that in a second. So at the most basic level for state-level courts in that state system, there are trial courts. These are known as the Missouri Circuit Courts. They have original jurisdiction over cases of state and local laws. Cases are argued before a jury or a judge who decides the facts of the case. In other words, someone's guilty or not guilty, or someone has harmed someone else in a civil case, or they haven't. Usually at the local level, they're split into divisions, such as criminal court or small claims court, where people sue each other over issues of under a few $1,000s, probate courts that handle wills and estates when people die, but there's all kinds of different ones. Municipal courts are all over. Those usually handle traffic tickets and that kind of thing. In Missouri, we have 45 circuits, about 350 judges, and they handle more than 500,000 cases a year. Keep in mind that most of those, though, are pretty quickly dispatched with their traffic tickets and that kind of thing. Now, at the federal level, they also have trial courts. These are called district courts. They have original jurisdiction, likewise, over things that involve federal laws in cases, or involving people from more than one state. Now, if one of the parties to the case feels like there's been an error made in the process of the case, or if potentially they don't like the outcome, they can appeal that to the next level, called an intermediate appeals court. At the state level, we call these the Missouri Courts of Appeals. These cases are argued before a panel of judges who decide whether due process or fair treatment was ensured at the trial. Now, like at the state level, the federal level also has courts of appeals, but these are a little different. At this level, the panel of judges can decide whether due process was ensured, but they also decide on the constitutionality of federal laws. So it's an important additional aspect related to the courts. Now, in Missouri, at the state level, they have a Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of Missouri has appellate jurisdiction over all state courts of appeals decisions and all cases involving constitutionality of state laws. So it's a little different from the federal system in that regard. The Missouri Supreme Court, though, is usually the final destination for any interpretations of the Missouri Constitution.
Oh, definitely.
Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has appellate jurisdiction over all federal courts of appeals, state Supreme Court decisions, and all cases involving really the U.S. Constitution. So basically, if you don't like your outcome at the Missouri Supreme Court level, you can actually appeal it to the U.S. Supreme Court if it involves the United States Constitution. The justices of the Supreme Court decide the proper application and constitutionality of all laws in the United States, all the way down to the local level. So it is the most powerful court in the United States and has final say on interpretation of laws. There's a little diagram I put together for you that helps you understand a little bit of the order of our system, and you can see pretty clearly that we have a dual court system, where on the right there's the U.S. courts, and on the left there's the Missouri courts, with that one little interesting exception that the Missouri Supreme Court could go to the U.S. Supreme Court if it involves a U.S. national issue. So hopefully you've taken good notes, and we'll see you next time.